Okay, so this is video 13. The topic is the circular flow model, how interactions determine the prices of goods and services. Now, we've obviously already learned about supply and demand and how those two things interact to determine prices. Well, this is how supply and demand actually work in the marketplace. And the circular flow model refers to a simple model which describes the circulation of money, represented by the green lines over here on the model, between producers and consumers. Firms and businesses, down here below, firms and businesses provide consumers with goods and services in exchange for consumer spending of money and for the factors of production from the household. So we'll get into a little more detail on this using a website that I have used previously. So simple circular flow. You guys are going to want to make this chart in your notes or fill it in depending on if you have the packet that I gave you or not. So at the very top of the circular flow model, we find the households, and down at the bottom we have the firms. Let's start with the households and say the households have money, the income they're earning from their work, to purchase goods and services from the firms. You guys, me, we are the households, all right? I earn money as a teacher. Your parents are earning money in their various jobs. They have money to spend. They need to purchase goods and services. They need to get your haircut. They need to get food for your refrigerator. They need to get heating or electricity for your home. All the goods and services, all those needs and wants we've already talked about. You need to purchase those from the businesses that are manufacturing them. So the money flows from the households to the firms, and in exchange, the goods and services flow to the household. That's creating one half of our circle right there. As you can see, the money flowing from the households to pay, to demand the goods and services, and the supply of the goods and services then flowing back to the households. The firms now have money, okay? They have profit left over after paying their expenses. They have revenue. And they need the inputs. They need the factors of the production so they can continue to make the goods and services that are being demanded by the households up here. They need land, labor, capital, entrepreneurship, all those ideas, all those things that we learned about at the very beginning of economics. Well, the supply of those comes from the households. Well, the households have the labor. The households have the natural resources through their ownership of land all over the world, and even the capital is something in entrepreneurship, ideas or things that the households are going to supply. So the firms have money, and they are going to take their leftover profit and spend it on continuing to operate their businesses. They need to purchase those inputs, the factors of production. So they send their money towards the households to hire workers, to purchase the natural resources they need. They have demand for the resources, and the households have supply of the resources. So remember, the money is represented by the green lines. The money is flowing from the households to the firms to demand the finished goods and services, and then the firms take that money and demand the factors of production that they need, and we have this circular flow being created in our economy. The right side of the circular flow diagram, were the purchase of the finished goods and services, okay? The needs and the wants that we are purchasing as consumers takes place in what is called the product market. So you've got a little box over there to put in. This is the product market. It's where finished products are exchanged. DVD players, televisions, apples, food items of other sorts, technological items, washing machine, vacuum cleaners. Okay, these things that the households need and demand in their finished form from the firms. The left side of the circular flow diagram over here is where the purchase of the resources take place, and that is called the resource or the factor market, or the factors of production. Now, what is missing from the circular flow diagram? Well, since we do not live in a pure market economy, if we did, we would stop here, because supply and demand would be determining the prices of all these things. There'd be nothing else involved. But because we live in a mixed economy, the government does have a role, so the government has to insert itself into the circular flow. And not surprisingly, if you were to guess where the government belonged, you'd say right in the middle of everything, and that is the correct answer. The government goes dead in the center of the circular flow diagram. So you can write government there in the center You're moving to the next page if you have a standard packet that you're filling out. The government receives money from the households through personal income taxes and property taxes. Remember, the households own land. They have those natural resources. They have to pay taxes on that property that they own. The households are also earning money flowing from the firms in exchange for their labor, so they have to pay tax on their income. So money is going to flow from the households to the government. So that line represents the personal and property taxes paid by the household to the government. So some revenue there for the government, money coming in to the government to support it. The government also receives revenue from the firms because businesses pay corporate income taxes. So the profit that a business earns, they're going to pay some tax on that and pay money into the government as well. So that represents, of course, the corporate taxes. Remember, green is for money. And if you're doing this at home, having a green pen or green colored pencil wouldn't be a bad idea for the lines that represent the money to help you out. Now, households also receive money from the government through transfer payments, welfare payments, things like food stamps, healthcare payments, things of that nature, but also through Social Security, Medicare for retired people. So while I may not receive Medicare or Social Security payments, I'm not over 65, I as a household am paying into the government, and the government is transferring that money to households that do have citizens over the age of 65. So money coming in, money going out. It's transfer payments because it's essentially transferring money from me to the government and then to somebody else. It can be referred to as redistribution as well. So there are your transfer payments. It's not equal. You'd say, if I'm paying in and money's coming back out, why do it at all? Well, not everybody is receiving out what they paid in exactly at the same time. For one thing, I'm paying in now. Later on in life, I won't be paying in, but will be receiving back in the form of Social Security, and that's one way or one role that the government plays in this process. Firms also receive money from the government in the form of subsidies. We talked about that in factors that can change supply. Well, a subsidy is when the government gives encouragement to a firm to produce a particular product. This happens often in agriculture. Big agriculture businesses are encouraged to produce certain types of foods that are needed, so a subsidy is paid by the government. So taxes come in, and then the taxes are sent back to various businesses in the form of subsidies or sometimes grants for particular forms of research that the government cannot do on its own. So we've got essential transfer payments, money coming in from households, money coming in from firms, but then that money flowing back. But the government doesn't send all of its money directly back to the sources where it gets it. The government also needs resources to operate. The government also demands goods and services and resources from the households and firms. So you can draw another green line going in either direction. Hey, the government's got to buy all sorts of office supplies. It needs copy machines. It needs vacuum cleaners. It needs refrigerators. So it goes to the product market and spends the tax money that's come in on purchasing those finished goods and services. The government also needs labor, especially from the households. The government's going to purchase the factors of production, labor, hire workers to work for the government, police officers, firefighters, Department of Defense employees, military members, on and on down the line, as well as some of the other factors of production for some of the things that the government would produce on its own. So those are the expenditures of the government: purchasing the finished products, purchasing the factors of production, and then of course the goods and services will flow back. You can see the additional arrow pop up to show when the government spends that money, the direction in which it will flow. One more. Now the green arrows indicate that the expenditures by the government go both to the households and to the firms in both of those markets. In return, the households and the firms supply the labor, they supply the product market. So this whole circular flow thing completes right about here. You can go on and get a lot more complicated, adding in imports and exports from other countries, and that does have a factor. But for our intro to economics, knowing that the government is in the middle of all this, receiving taxes, purchasing goods and services, hiring workers, and then how the money flows. And remember, supply and demand is governing all of this. The demand and the supply is where prices are going to be set in the product market. The demand for labor and then the supply of labor is where the prices are going to be set for how much people earn for wages and salaries. So hopefully you have your diagram filled out. It's all here in front of you. In class, we're going to do a simulation. You're going to play the role of a household or a firm, and we're going to see how all these things take place in exchanging, and then how supply and demand, of course, is determining prices. That will be it for today. Make sure you fill out the Google form, submit on Edmodo, and have your notes ready for tomorrow's quiz.